Hey guys, it's Kate, and I hope you're having a great day. I have kind of a surprise today, and it is this little unboxing. So I went on Amazon and I purchased this ShinHan Professional Designers gouache. And I have not used gouache in several years actually, so I'm really excited to try this out because currently I really don't own any except for Winsor Newton white gouache that I like to mix with watercolors sometimes. Another thing I got is this porcelain paint palette from Meeden, and this came in the same order, and so I did unbox this one, but I'm really excited to use this as my gouache palette. Now, I'm also going to be working today in a mixed media rough surface paper. It's a Canson notebook, and it's a 7 by 10 inch, I think. And so I'm going to take the plastic wrap off of this, and then we'll get started. Okay, I am back and we are unwrapped. So real quick, before I really get into it, I just want to go over this ceramic or porcelain paint palette again. So this is the box. It came well wrapped in, it actually was in some styrofoam, and it feels really nice and heavy and thick. So you can see how thick it is, and on the well side, and it has just a nice feeling surface. So I'm pretty excited to use this. And then this is a nice heavy feeling cardboard box. And on the plastic wrap, it does have the pigment list on it, but I took that off. But when you remove the lid, it does have the pigment information, the transparency, and everything on each bottle. So these are 15 milliliter bottles or half an ounce, so they're pretty large. And I got the 12 color set here. So it has a really good mixing range and also black and white. And on the inside of the lid, you can see all the other colors that this brand has. Apparently they have 72 colors, and they have multiple sets available on Amazon, but I stuck with the 12 color set. Now, I am not a gouache professional. I'm not even a watercolor professional, but I have enjoyed playing with gouache paints in the past. I did write down the pigment information for each one. And also it has light fast rating, so everything is between 3 and 4 stars. Most are 3, except the 4-star ones are turquoise blue, ultramarine light, burnt sienna, and ivory black, and everything else is 3 stars. We have a couple of things I noticed also is that there's a color in here called Permanent Green Light, and you can see the pigments in it are PY3 and PG7, and we have PY3 in Permanent Yellow and PG7 in Viridian, which I did look up and is also commonly used in phthalo green. But these two colors mixed together will give you permanent green light. So I thought that was just kind of interesting. So what I'm going to do is I drew a black line across my page, and I am going to do a full strength swatch from the tube, and then I am also going to add a little bit of water in it and give you another swatch, and then we can kind of see how all of that stacks up as far as transparency, the creaminess, how it goes down, and all that good stuff. So I am going to grab my 1/2-inch flat brush, and again I'm mixing on, or I'm painting on rough. This is mixed media paper. I believe it's 114 pound weight. So I'm going to go first into this carmine, and it feels really creamy out of the tube. I'm going to hold this up a little bit so you can kind of see how it spreads around, but that feels really nice on my brush just straight out of the tube. So I'm going to do a little swatch here, just like that from the tube. Then I'm going to do a quick little dip in my water jar and mix this up a little bit and do another swatch that's more watery, and it goes down really nicely on the paper. Weirdly, it looks like the watery swatch actually has better coverage. I don't know how that happened. You saw me add water, so these are kind of something's happening. I don't know. So next up we have Scarlet Red, which is PR 112 and PR 254. This is another 3-star light fastness color. And again, it's really creamy outside of the tube. So I'm going to do one straight through just with a moist brush. I did get one small water droplet on my paper, and that's that little bit of spread you see there. So I am going to dip into my jar, get a little bit of water here, and then do another swatch right next to it. And these colors so far are very creamy, very vibrant, and I think I'm going to really enjoy these. So while I do some swatching, I'm going to talk a little bit about gouache in general from what I know anyway. So, oops, a lot came out there. I'm going to have to do a painting with a lot of yellow. So these are very creamy. I have worked with some thicker gouaches. This is, you know, pretty middle of the road, I guess I could say. It's not too thin, but it feels so buttery. All right, I'm just going to pick some straight up with my brush and put that over the color and the black. And then I'm going to rinse my brush and put a little bit of water in here. And then add another stroke. So you might, when you're searching for gouaches or you're thinking of buying one, there's a couple of different kinds. Now this says artist grade designer gouache, and one thing I want to note is I think a lot of gouaches, when they say designer, they're not really meant to be permanent, although I have read that gouache in general is kind of difficult to get permanent light fast. So, but again, I'm just going by what I read. So what I can also say is that you'll also see the professional gouaches, which I guess are more light fast and more meant for long-term artwork where you can sell it and you're not going to have issues with a lot of fading and stuff as much as you would have with a different gouache or a just a less expensive, less color fast gouache or less color fast pigments. But you might also see packages that are marked as acryl gouache or acrylic gouache. And this here is traditional gouache. So, oh, this is much thicker. See, I think it's really just the yellows because this is a pretty thick color. You can kind of see it just sort of sitting there in the pan. So acrylic gouache will also dry matte, which gouache does. It dries matte. But if you get the acrylic kind versus the traditional kind, it will actually also dry pretty much waterproof, just like regular acrylic paint. And depending on what your art style is, you may or may not want that. So with your acrylic paints and stuff, you know, you might want to do some layering and not necessarily want to activate colors underneath when you re-wet your paper, which with traditional gouache, you can always reactivate it just like you can with watercolor. And so just something to keep in mind if you're shopping for gouache. Oh, that's a beautiful color. I love that. All right, I'm giving a rinse. Gonna add some water to this and do a second little swipe. You know, even adding water, this is really something with the coverage. So you could probably thin this out quite a bit. All right, next up, let's go with the turquoise. Turquoise is one of my favorite colors, so I'm pretty excited to give this a try. But that Viridian, that PG7 is also really beautiful. I really like those phthalo blues and greens, so that's going to be a favorite for me. And I think depending on your brand, you might see it marked as either of those colors. So for ShinHan, they call that pigment Viridian. So, but going back to the permanence of gouache, you can get the acrylic kind, and I know that some people really like that. Now, I'll say, I mean, that's one of the things I enjoy so much about working with craft paint. When you're getting into the acrylics, craft paint dries pretty matte also. So if you have worked with craft paint, then the way it dries is going to be somewhat similar to gouache. It's just a very matte finish. And depending on the brand, you can get more or less opacity. Some of the more inexpensive craft paints have, you got to put on pretty much several coats before you have true opacity. But that's also the same with different types of gouache or different brands of gouache. So that's something to keep in mind too. But the matte finish is really nice, and it's different than most other paints that you might use. And gouache can also be thinned down enough to use as a watercolor. So, it has opacity. It's basically, the definition is pretty much an opaque watercolor if you're working with gouache, and that's really all it is. It's water-based. The traditional gouache, like I have here, will re-wet with water, so even if this dries in my palette, I can reactivate it anytime I want, although the quality of the paint might be a little bit different. At least that is what I hear. But I guess I'll be able to test that theory. So I'm going to grab some of this violet, which is a beautiful color. I mean, these are all so vibrant, and you can see that on the paper, and they have pretty good coverage. You can see a little bit of the traveling paint on the ones that I kind of mixed in some water, and I'm going to water down this violet a bit and do a second stroke here. But I have been really happy with these, and they just feel so smooth and buttery. They really do. Okay, I only have 3 colors left, but I am so happy with these. Now, some of them out of the tube are thicker than others. This one looks like it's going to be another bit of a thinner one. And some of this could be just the way it's shipped also. There may be a little bit of binder toward the top on some of these. I'm not really sure. I guess time will tell as far as, as I keep using it, maybe I'll get down into the bottle more. I haven't seen obvious signs of binder at the top, but this burnt sienna is a little bit watery out of the bottle, but the color is beautiful. It reminds me of my Amsterdam burnt sienna ink that I have, and it's one of my favorites to use when I grab my inks. All right, down to the last 2. So this is the ivory black, and this also comes out of the tube pretty thick. And so let's see how this goes down. It looks very rich, and that's a really good black. So I'm going to grab some water and thin it out a bit and do a second stroke right next to it. And then last but not least is our permanent white. And this is PW6, and it's like a titanium white. And it is also pretty thick. I do see a little bit of binder at the top, and I'm going to see if I can focus, but there's a little bit of yellowness around the rim, and that's about all I can see. So it might be some of the binder, but this is nice and thick and creamy out of the tube as well. Now hopefully I didn't make my water too dirty because I'm dipping in my jar, but I don't want to get, you know, my white very, you know, tinted with the water. All right, so I've got my white stripe down. Let me dip into my water a bit and add that in. You can see my water slightly tinted, but I think for the purposes of this, it should be okay. You can see a very, very slight off-white, but it's not really noticeable. So I think that should be okay. That's just my water that's gone a little bit gray. I should have started with my white for the swatching, but let's take a look at these. So I'm going to hold up my palette first so you can kind of see the consistency of these with some water added. And you can see where some of them are still pretty creamy, where I didn't mix it all in with water. And I'll set that aside. And then I will hold up these swatches so you can get a close look. And you can also get a close look at all of the pigment numbers and the color names. And these have 72 colors. Again, I only got the 12 color set, but they do have 72 colors available. And my set I paid about $33 for. So it's about, well, a little less than, $3 a tube. So that is about what you get with this, which I think for the quality, that's a pretty good buy. And I don't know, I like to try things that aren't, super popular. I like to try things that maybe I can feel like I discovered a good art product. But also it's something that I read some of the reviews on there and people seemed so happy with it. And so far, so am I. So I'm going to let this completely dry and then we'll come back and take one last look, and I will do a little bit of a painting. So I'll be back in just a second. Okay, I am pretty much 100% dry except for a tiny burnt sienna spot and an even tinier black spot. So you can see the very matte finish on the dried paint. There's no shine except for those two little wet spots I was telling you about. And you can see how they dried with the opacity levels as well. So I'll give you a close-up here, and then I am actually going to go ahead and just flip the page and do a couple of little paintings. So I have my palette here still, and I might be adding some more paints, but I'm just going to start with what I've got here so far. I'm going to keep my flat brush, and I'm going to grab my little liner brush and probably a small round. So we'll just kind of play around with those. Might grab another one in case I need it. And so I was sitting here drinking some seltzer water. And by the way, the Polar brand Blood Orange Lemonade is delicious. I'm not sponsored. I just happen to be drinking it and I just finished it actually. But I figured, you know what? It might be kind of cool to paint a little orange slice. So I'm going to start with that and paint a couple other things to try to experiment with dark over light, light over dark, blending some colors. I might make a simple little sunset. So I'm just going to do a few little painting illustrations on this page. So first, I need to get something round. Well, I guess I'll just use my can. So I'm going to just grab my number 2 pencil and make a circle shape for my orange slice. And that will be that. Now I'm just going to grab my ruler real quick because what I'm going to do is separate my sections. So I'm going to put across each way, and then I'm going to divide each of those in half, and I'm going to turn those into my little orange sections. So one of the nice things about gouache and its opacity is it's a lot easier to cover up your pencil marks. So I am going to start with the orange first, and actually I'm going to grab my round, or not my round brush, my flat brush, and I am going to dip into this white and a little bit of this scarlet red, and I know I've got some of this yellow orange too, and maybe I'll just mix these in together a bit. I want to make sure to use up as much color from my palette as I can. So I'm just going to kind of go around the outside, and I'm going to keep these very simple and just make my little orange peel. And then if you look at an orange slice, you'll see the segments are kind of divided by this very light, almost whitish yellow fleshy part. So, and it's going to be on the outside by the peel also. So I'm just going to fill in right next to where I put my lines. Now I'm not going to worry about being perfect because I'm going to come back in with my white, but I want to get kind of that base orange in there for right now. So I'm just using my lines as kind of a guide to help me space out my little orange segments. And I love the way that this paint goes down. So I haven't even re-dipped into my palette yet. I'm just sort of having fun painting here. And this will help me kind of loosen up a bit too. I want to just have fun making some sort of doodly painting. So I'm going to let that start to dry a bit and rinse my brush. And I think next I am going to work on blending color. So I'm going to rinse my brush really well. And I'm going to make a little bit of a sunset illustration to see how these colors blend together. So I think I'm going to start off with this ultramarine light to get a really nice dark blue, just like that. And then I'm going to start dipping into this violet and work my way down, just like this. And then I can also come in and grab some white and start lightening up, and I might need a little bit more white. I think I'm pretty much out in my palette, so let me just get a little dollop of this. I think when you're working with gouache, white is going to be one of the colors you really go through a lot, and at least I find that with acrylic too. So something to keep in mind is you might end up wanting to invest in a larger tube of white so you can do plenty of blending. All right, so I think that'll kind of be my little sunset. And I did a really, I don't know, I did kind of a not a very nice blend, so maybe I'll go over this again with some more color and just layer it. Now I'm going to dip into this black, and I am going to put down a dark colored background, and I am going to go over the top of that with a lighter color. So I want to get it dark, but not like a super thick layer of paint, because what I'd like to do is try not to reactivate it too much by painting over it. And one of the fastest ways to reactivate a color is to have too thick of a layer on your paper. So if you don't want that to happen, then just put down a little bit of a thinner layer. I mean, you want it to be thick enough to coat, but not have like, you know, impasto on your paper. Okay, so I'm gonna let that start to dry, and let's do another box with yellow. And I'm just gonna dip in just a little bit of water here and mix this up and make another little gouache box. I love the brightness of these colors. They're just so vibrant. This is just a beautiful yellow, and it just spreads really nicely. I'm not getting like a ton of, you know, crazy brush marks. It's not really misbehaving at all. Okay, I'm going to grab just a little bit more black. It's another thing with gouache, you'll go through a bit more than you will with watercolor, just because you need more for coverage. It is an opaque medium, so that's something else to kind of keep in mind. And I'm kind of just refamiliarizing myself with it. It's been a really, really long time since I have painted with gouache, but I remember having a lot of fun with it. Now you can see with this second coat, I am really getting some nice darkness here, and it's starting to eliminate some of those brush strokes also. Now, probably my background was not completely dry yet, so I may have disturbed some of that first layer, but even so, it has gone down really nicely there. So what I'm going to do now is grab my smaller round, and I'm going to pick up some of this white and a little tiny bit of yellow. And I'm going to put some more white on here because I'm going to need a bit of paint. I'm kind of running out of a little bit of space to mix, but I'm going to go back to my orange slice here and start painting out these lines. Now I'm going to mix a little bit of this white in with this. Let me see, this is the permanent green light. And I'm going to mix a little bit more white in with it to brighten it up some more, and add just a little bit of water. And my black is dry to the touch, so let's see how this color goes down. And that's some nice opacity right there. Now I'm not going to try to work this too much because I don't want to reactivate too much of that black. So I'm not going to be, you know, you don't want to like paint. Just do slow buildup of layers. You can always add another coat to your green, but if you just keep working it into the black, you're going to reactivate it. So for this one, why don't I go into this carmine? Yep, it's the carmine. And I'm just going to make some little circles here. And I'm just going to keep it simple. The red is going down really, really nicely. Dark over light's always going to be a lot easier. Now, if I were to use a different color, I guess we can see how much that blends. Like, I'm not getting orange. This red is staying red. Because when you mix red and yellow, you do get orange. So I'm not having like a big reactivation problem here. Another thing that I can try is to go into my blue. So I'm just going to go into, this is the turquoise blue, I believe. And I'm just going to grab some of this and make some more circles, and we'll see if they go green, mixing yellow and blue. But so far, not having any issues at all. So my layers are drying pretty well. I'm getting really nice clean color, really opaque. I'm pretty happy here, and it's just going down so smoothly, like I don't have to work at it. Now I do have a little bit here and a little bit here where it looks like I can still see a little bit of yellow through it, and it might even be also because my blue on my palette is a little bit thin. So that's something that you can play around with too, is just the mixture of your water and paint. You want it to stay pretty creamy. Now you can absolutely thin it down to be watery, but you're going to start getting that transparency back in there again, as if you were working with regular watercolor. So if you want to maintain your opacity, you want to try to find that sweet spot where it is thin enough to work with easily, but thick enough to stay opaque. So I think I'm going to do some little mountains here. Why not, right? Now in my bottom right hand corner, I'm going to see I'm going to revisit this mixing a little bit, and I'm going to see about mixing some colors right here on the page. So I am actually going to go into, let me see, those pigments. It was the permanent yellow and viridian, I think, that make the permanent green light in this palette. So I'm going to grab some of this yellow, and then I'm going to rinse my brush pretty well and grab some of this viridian. And boy, that's pretty nice when you mix it right there on the page. Now this is a little bit watery still, but let's just see about getting some of these blends. And I want to try this on some watercolor paper also, because that can also make a difference. Like I'm working on mixed media paper right now, which isn't quite as nice for watery media, but with gouache, if I was to have the right consistency, it wouldn't make that much of a difference, because I'm not really wanting this to just flow all over the place like I might want with watercolor. I'm going to grab some more of this scarlet red. Now red and green, they're complementary colors. So I might be getting a little bit of a brownie look there. But boy, that red is just really something. Now even this mix right here is a little bit watery, and you can see how it's kind of flowing out into my paper. If it's thick enough, you won't really have that happening. So like if I go over it right here, it's kind of going away a bit, but it's still kind of happening. So just keep that in mind, and you'll want to play around with your consistencies. And if any of you watching are regular gouache artists, I'd love to hear from you on any tips and tricks that you might have. This is a medium that I do not normally use, so I am definitely interested in hearing any tips that you might have that might also help somebody else who's watching this video. So I'm going to go into that purple and start mixing some here. I kind of like that. That's a really nice little neutral color. So I still have some water here, but I'm just going to embrace it and have some fun. So I've got my permanent green light has actually started drying a little bit here on my palette. So I'm going to use a little bit of water and reactivate that and just go in here and start blending and see what we get. And that's almost like an olive green color. That's pretty. So this is, I think, going to be a really good little mixing palette. So I'm going back to my round brush and I'm going to pick up just a little bit of this orange and mix it with that white. And I'm going to get kind of a light orange here that's lighter than what's on my little orange slice. And I'm just going to add a little bit of texture lines here. This is one of the cool things about gouache is you can really have fun with layering. So I'm going to add some little orange doodads in my little segments to give this some texture. This is a very doodly orange slice, I'll say that. Okay, I'm going to go back into this permanent green light again, and I'm going to add a second coat to my leaves. And then I'm going to come over here into my red and orange mix, and I'm going to come back over to my orange. I'm just going to thin out this little segment next to the peel. Now maybe I'll go into this violet again, and it has started to dry a little bit, so I'm just kind of reactivating it with some water, and I might come and do just a little bit of a highlight or a low light on these mountains. Maybe add just a little bit of a purple tint to that black. Put some little stars in this sky right here. Okay, my camera actually stopped recording. I went too long. Okay, so what I was going to say is if we wanted to see white over a dark background, I can kind of scoop in here and get some white out and put in a little moon. And I think I need just a touch of water. That's where you get some of that roughness if you don't have quite enough for a nice creamy spread. So I'll just kind of go around here and throw on a little moon in the sky. And I think for the purposes of this unboxing and testing, we can call this good. The paint went a long way. Like I said, if you do paint with a lot of gouache, you're going to probably go through a lot of white because that's going to be your way to lighten colors and still keep your opacity. But I am going to go ahead and show you a close-up. A couple of spots on here are still wet, including my dots here, but you can still see, get a good look at the coverage of the paint and maybe get some ideas for some of the things that you can do with it. So I think given more opportunity, I can probably do a little bit better with a blend. I think it's definitely capable of a very smooth, lovely blend, but it's also going to take some practice for me because I am not used to working with gouache. But I really enjoyed this little set, and I think it's not a bad buy for $33. You get a good amount of paint, and it is really nice to work with. So if you are looking for gouache, if you're not interested in gouache, well, don't buy any gouache. But if you are interested in gouache and you're looking for a kind to use, you might consider this just based on this video and take a look and see if anybody else has done any reviews of this gouache. You could even consider getting one of the larger sets. I'll go ahead and put a link to it in the description below if you're interested in learning more. But I hope you enjoyed this video today, learned some things about gouache, and, listen to me ramble on and on about well, lots of things. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to give it a thumbs up if you found it helpful. Leave a comment below if you have any tips for anyone else or if you use gouache and have some recommendations. And until next time, keep creating. Bye.